So this morning I'd like to be a weaver, to integrate more fully, really, actually all the aspects of the theories and practice that we've been doing over the last 6 weeks. Let's return very briefly to the kind of that pith instruction from Panchen yesterday. He doesn't have a whole lot to say here, as he's guiding us into the Vipashyana on the nature of the self. But he says, examine very carefully, analyze closely, with mindfulness, with clarity, the way of existing. The way of existing. One is Neluk or Netsul, the way of abiding, the way of remaining. It means all of those. And then Namsul is easy, the way you appear. And then how do you apprehend yourself? I want to return there, because the way of abiding and the way of appearing, I would say, somewhat different. I'm going to go back to some familiar analogies from yesterday. Robert De Niro, I think this is very widely accepted. He's a very fine actor, very gifted, and he's manifested that through a great number of films over the years, in which he's played a wide variety of roles. He's not always equally excellent, but he's very gifted, and he's always very gifted, and he has been since an early age. I think we agree on that. Okay? And so if you see from scene to scene, but more importantly, from one movie to the next, the role he's playing, those are how he appears. Here he's a villain, here he's a loving father, here he's a Chökyi father-in-law, or what have you. But homogeneously across that board, there's a certain way of his acting that I think a real connoisseur will recognize. This is in these different ways of appearing, these are some of his trademark, his characteristics, even though he may manifest in many different roles, which he does, of course. Take one other example, fire. Fire. Fire is sometimes red, sometimes yellow, it's blue, it's a blowtorch, it's a candle, it's supernova, it's a kerosene lamp. It manifests in many, many, many ways, right? Clearly. And the intensity of its heat, of course, some fire is hotter than other fire. But then if we ask, so that's how fire appears in many, many different ways. And yet, Robert De Niro is not different people. He's not a woman here, and although he was a young man in this role, and he was an old man in that role, middle-aged in that role, but nevertheless, he's never a popsicle or a chipmunk. There's some things that are abiding, and that's what you can see. And then if you want to judge his career as a whole, then you would take that, what is that common thread, right? And likewise, in all of the manifestations of fire, it's always hot, it's always burning, right? If it's not that, then it's not fire. Then it's a popsicle or a chipmunk. And so, bringing this home now, we ourselves appear in many different ways. Each of us here, right? Even in one lifetime, let alone from lifetime to lifetime, which is clearly the big picture. Then we have the full spectrum. Full spectrum, from being demonic, diabolical, hell being, vicious serial killer to angelic and so forth. In past life we've covered the spectrum. Everybody has. Gautama, before he became enlightened, before he set up on the path, he covered the whole spectrum. So we're all full spectrum sentient beings. But in the course of one lifetime, well, nobody here has been a serial killer and so forth and so on. Nevertheless, we have a pretty big bandwidth, yes? A bandwidth of how we're appearing. How we appear from day to day, situation to situation. Sometimes very mean-spirited, some sort of generous, sometimes hostile and vindictive, and sometimes gentle and kind, and so forth and so on. So we appear in many different ways. Right? And in terms of our appearances, some very agreeable, for all of us here. Very agreeable, very pleasant, endearing, and other times just repugnant. Oh, I can't stand it. Your behavior, the way you appear, the way you act, the way you're thinking, the way you're talking, whatever. At least I'm talking first person here. And yet, where's the common denominator? What's the way of abiding? What abides? Just for one individual in one lifetime. What can you see? Here's Robert De Niro in this role as a young man, and here he is, and here he is. But definitely you can recognize him. Right? There's something common, the way of abiding, something that abides through. And I'm speaking about him just as an actor, not as in role as a father, a husband, a grandfather, and so forth and so on. That's something outside. I'm just giving that bandwidth of him as an actor. And here we are as sentient beings, as human beings. This is the role we're playing. in this particular lifetime. But within that, of course, while he is an actor, he might not have been always an actor, maybe he had a profession before that, I don't know. But here we are as human beings, but within that context as human beings, what is abiding? What is abiding? That every single day, in all of our manifestations, from the most angelic to the most demonic and vindictive and so forth, what's abiding? What's abiding, right? And I'm going to relate this now to loving kindness. But one last comment on that point. When we speak of neluk or netsul, luk means something very similar, way of, mode of. We can speak of ultimate and relative. Ultimate is easy, it's empty of inherent nature. That's easy. And that's whether you're a popsicle, a chipmunk, or a human being, or Robert De Niro. Empty of inherent nature, we're finished, it's easy. Right? But then we have the relative neluk, the relative way of abiding. And then we have a lot of differences, from one human being to one sentient being to another, and so on. So what's abiding? What's abiding now on this relative level, which is where all the tremendous diversity is, the richness, the range, the color, right? Because emptiness is simple, it's emptiness of inherent nature. Right? But in terms of the manifest level, the relative level, phenomenal level, what is abiding? That's an interesting question, I think. To examine as we introspectively examine our own presence here on the planet throughout the course of our lives. What is abiding in each of us individually? I find so interesting dreams, and especially lucid dreams, where when you're in the midst of a lucid dream, you are viewing everyone in the dream, let's say from the perspective of substrate consciousness, because that's where you just came from. You know, if you're in deep dreamless sleep and you're lucid, and then you come from lucid dreamless sleep into a lucid dream, you're just born awake, like a tuku into that dream, then you just see from the first person you see, yourself or somebody else, from the first person you see from that perspective that's not caught up and absorbed into, with cognitive fusion, into any of the persona within the dream. You're viewing every person, including the one that you're kind of identifying with here, but not too seriously, because you're lucid, and everyone else. You know something about every person there. Every person there. They're all you. There are no intruders. Nobody hopped the fence and jumped into your substrate. Right? They're all you. And so welcome to yourself in the broad bandwidth. Maybe you have a long and very rich dream in which there are villains and there are heroes and gorgeous people and disgustingly ugly people and there are, let's just stick with people, but I mean human beings, let alone animals and devas and other spirits and so on. But to view all of them and say, but to recognize simply what's obvious. From that perspective, it's just obvious. There's no one who jumped into my dream here who is not me, who is not an expression of my substrate consciousness. And moreover, they're all equally me. I'd like to think the nicer ones are more me than the nastier ones, but they're all equally me. Right? Because there's nothing coming from outside. Again, it's not only nobody else jumps into the dream, but there are no extraneous influences. Like, I was having this dream and then I got some of Amy's cooties came in, and she influenced some of my characters. It wasn't really me, it was her, But that's silly. It's silly. If we have cooties, there are cooties. If you don't speak American English, I'm sorry. Cooties means like something yucky, disgusting. Girls have them. According to young boys. But that's interesting though, isn't it? Within the dream, you're viewing, everybody you're viewing is yourself. It's a society of your mind, to use Martin Minsky's term. But literally it's populated only by reflections refracted, and like light refracted. Like these are all refracted appearances of yourself and no one else. It's interesting. So to develop loving kindness within a dream would be to see the commonality between all these appearances and knowing that in fact they're all you. From the waking state, from the waking state, our waking state. If you're a Vidyadhara and you're resting in Rigpa, right? You're resting in Rigpa. You're Vidyadhara, so that's your job now. Your job is no job. Your job is not doing. Your job is simply dwelling free of activity without activating your sentient being mind. This particular sentient being mind, you're simply viewing all phenomena from the perspective of Rigpa. That's where you have open presence, right? Viewing from Rigpa, that's the Dzogchen view. From that perspective, all sentient beings you see are you. All sentient beings are expressions, creative expressions, effulgences of, and here's the emphasis, of your own pristine awareness. Not God as somebody else, Buddha Shakyamuni or Buddha Maitreya. No, nobody jumped the fence into your Dhammadhatu and into your Rigpa. They're all equally and without exception. Nothing other than displays of your own Rigpa. And that goes for the most vile people that have ever manifested on planet Earth. And there are some pretty vile ones, we know. As well as everybody, the whole spectrum from hell realms to pure lands. And they're all equally, with equal purity, seen as displays of yourself. So we recall a quote that I've already cited in our notes for this retreat from Dujjal Lingpa, that is Padmasambhava, the Vajra essence, saying that Rigpa is ultimate bodhicitta. Realize Rigpa, view reality from the perspective of Rigpa. You are viewing reality from the perspective of ultimate bodhicitta, and relative bodhicitta spontaneously emerges from that. You do not need to look elsewhere to generate in some contrived, dualistic, grasping kind of way bodhicitta. If you've tapped into Rigpa, it comes out for free. It's freely manifest because it's simply an expression of the relative, is an expression of the ultimate. And so insofar as you're resting in Rigpa, then bodhicitta is there. Well, bodhicitta is just the natural and the only realistic response to all sentient beings. And of course, it's imbued with the four greats, with Mahamaitri, Mahakaruna, Mahamudra, Mahamupeksha, and of course the four measurables, they're all there. They're all implicit in bodhicitta. Right? So tap into the one and you view the many with just sublime bodhicitta. Then we come back to loving kindness. That's where I'd like to go this morning. Extending out beyond the four questions, now start to expand the sphere. I find Buddhaghosa's analysis of all the four measurables, the four divine abidings of Brahmavada, I find it just simply brilliant. It's breathtaking, deep, incisive, loving, and wise. And so I just want to highlight one element here, which is enormously important for anyone who really wishes to more and more deeply experience loving kindness. And more broadly, not just for one's loved one, one's child, the spouse, and so on, but really to break down the barriers, right? As Buddhaghosa so beautifully says, to break down the barriers so it doesn't, that flow of loving kindness doesn't go out and then stop. Biologically, biological imperative, evolution, natural selection, it will flow out to family members, maybe flow out to your village, maybe flow out to your tribe, maybe to your species, and then it tapers off. Basically, how similar are you to me? When a mother says, "You're my blood," oh, that's very similar. You're my child. That's very similar. We share blood. Okay. Or in the Tibetan tradition, Buddhist tradition, bone from the father of the bone, from the blood, from the mother of blood. They say that. So the father said, "You're my bone," that, like the young, right? So that sense of identity, that, well, we're family, what can I say? I can't give up on you. We're family. Because we're so similar. I mean, you're me, I'm you, we're bone, we're blood, flesh and bone, flesh and blood. But then, of course, then you're not, and they're not, and then that's where the barrier breaks down. So we get that as a gift from that natural selection. We get that as a gift from just biological evolution. But then to break down the barriers, that's where Dharma comes in. And if there's no Dharma, then those barriers don't get broken down. Pretty much they don't get broken down. Then we have war. But from Dharma, we break down the barriers. And so what is the catalyst then? What is the proximate cause? The language is all very technical, very quite arid, and you look into the meaning of it, it's just totally juicy. What is it that triggers, catalyzes, arouses, in a very immediate way, the sense of loving kindness? And it is, I'm sure many of you will remember, it's extremely important. If you've not learned it, then I would suggest learn it and memorize it and keep the memory alive for the rest of your life. It's seeing the lovable quality. Seeing the lovable quality, the lovableness, the endearing quality. The quality of the other that makes that person worthy of affection, of warmth, of love, of kindness, of loving kindness. That. If we don't see that, if that's not perceptible, then we may go through the routine, we may display behavior, maybe genuine, maybe altruistic. But we can behave altruistically without being altruistic. And that's better than behaving maliciously. One can behave generously without being generous. And that's better than being stingy. But Shantideva highlights, it's highlighted everywhere, that the sixth perfection is all an inside job. The six perfections are all qualities of the mind. They're not qualities of behavior. Behavior is the outer glow. But generosity is not how big your check is, or how often you're making gifts. If you're living as a solitary yogi in solitude, well, you're not going to be making gifts to many people. But you may be simply an embodiment of generosity. And likewise, ethics, patience, enthusiasm, meditation, wisdom, it's all an inside job, right? And what we see is simply the outer manifestation of that. But if there's no insight, then that is not an expression. It's not actually generosity in Buddhist view. It's just writing a check or doing some work for somebody. This is a really interesting point, deep point. People often don't appear lovable. People often display attitudes and behavior, they speak in such ways where we can surmise their attitude, and they're not lovable. They're really quite sometimes awful or trivial or petty or disagreeable and disgusting and so forth. The way people speak on occasion is just deplorable, really just awful, you know. And the way people behave on occasion, same, of course. And there's just, and that's the end of the story. There's no happy face on that one. If a father is beating his child, there's no happy face on that one. There's no way, well, what do he means well? No, he's beating his child. No, it's deplorable behavior. So there is no fooling around here, you know, pretending. There's behavior, there's speech, there's attitudes, there's ways of thinking, intentions, and so forth that are really, really, really toxic, rooted from misery throughout the world. So where's the lovable quality? And this is why I started with Robert De Niro. And that what abides? What abides? If we point to even the greatest villains in history, and we have some pretty big top items there, individuals and communities, where you look at their behavior, you almost faint just by the sheer grotesqueness of it. Not all the time. Not all the time. I'm not going to give an example. You can find your own example. Whoever comes to mind. Think of that person when he or she was 3 years old, and 5 years old, and maybe falling in love, or tending the garden, or looking after his or her dog, and so forth. Nobody can maintain that 24 hours a day throughout a lifetime. No matter how deeply damaged their minds are. Nobody can do that. Nobody can be that constant. And nor can we. We can get into really bad moods. We can get into real ruts that are really quite harmful and toxic. But not all the time. So where's the level of quality? If we're attending to the mode of appearance, it's going to be like weather, right? And that's regarding ourselves. When you're an Arya Bodhisattva, you're set. You have a green card, and it's fine. But until then, as long as you're an ordinary citizen, like somebody like me, you have your good days and your bad days. And so if our loving kindness, as we direct loving kindness to others, if it's going to be based upon the namsu, the way of appearance, then it's going to be fair weather loving kindness, like a fair weather friend, friendly when the person is nice and then not, and so forth. So it can't be that. It'll never be immeasurable loving kindness. If it's responding to, how are you appearing today? Like if you're a spouse and you wake up in the morning, you look over your spouse, okay, what's it going to be today? I have to see whether I love you today. Well, I guess that's not a marriage, that's just kind of whatever, something else. So it has to be something deeper, netsu, the way of abiding, So I want to wrap this up. I'm eager to get back to the practice. But I want to tie all of this together. The wisdom teaching there from Panchen, the teachings on loving kindness from Buddha Gosa, our day-to-day practice in retreat, and then I'm giving you your traveling papers. That is, what can you bring to the airport? Shamatha probably not so much, right? And onto the airplane, and with your family, back into the city, back into the job. What are your traveling papers? What can you carry with you? That you can know, it's like, like a credit card. You can just use it anywhere. Whether you're in Ulaanbaatar or you're in Rio de Janeiro or you're in Sydney, the credit card you can pretty much use anywhere. The four measurables you can use anywhere. Right? You really can. In solitude. And with the most difficult people you've ever encountered in your life. That's what you can carry with you. Your traveling papers. The lovable quality. In the Mahayana tradition, you have these two routes. A Sangha route, Maitreya Asanga route, and then we have the Madhusri Shantideva route. And the Maitreya Asanga route is our right. We're about to launch out on the path of cultivating bodhicitta. And the first point is just a statement of fact that all sentient beings have been your mother. Every single one has been your mother at some time in the past. And mothers are loving and caring, and we owe them an immense debt of gratitude. So look upon all sentient beings as being your mother. And in so doing, you'll view them with the same sense of endearment, of gratitude, of affection, of warmth, as you do your own mother, and they're all equally your mother, whether they're reptiles or villains or heroes and so forth. And so get cracking. You all sentient beings as your mother. Okay? This worked very well. I mean, it's worked for many, many centuries in India, in Tibet, and so forth. For those who have a very deep conviction that what I just said is true, for starters, that yes, it's, that's true. You appear differently. I don't recognize you from past lives, but yes. There are people who just say, but that's true, of course, so let's carry on. That's one necessary thing. If you don't think it's true, then you got no basis. It's like saying, let's start with a fairy tale and proceed from there. So that's one point. But the second point also is poignantly evident when Tibetan Lamas and others teach Tibetan Buddhism in the West. And I've heard this so many times. You all sent beings to your mother, and that hand pops up. You don't know my mother. She is so neurotic, and she was awful. And I've gone through years of therapy trying to get over the way she displayed her mental afflictions all over a kid, like projectile vomiting. And if I viewed all sentient beings as my mother, I wouldn't like any of them. So there's not a whole lot of wiggle room there. So that may be problematic. It may not be the most effective path to go. Might it be helpful to really try to develop loving kindness to your mother, seeing through the neuroses and so forth and so on, and seeing to you? Yeah, it'd be a very, very good idea. That'd be part of the deep healing. You may want to go to a therapist for that. I'm very seriously. But if it's extremely difficult relationship, or maybe cold, maybe the mother was just cold. Not all mothers are loving, maybe just cold. In Great Britain in classical times, not that British women are cold at all, but I've known some British aristocrats, and the way the parents, I think loving parents, would just ship their kids off to boarding school at an early age, and they'd hardly see them. How exactly you would develop, like a 5-year-old, a 10-year-old, develop the sense my mother really cherishes and loves me and so forth, and you almost never see her, and you're being raised by other people when they beat you a lot. Is that okay? Yeah. So, I'm speaking, I'm not picking on the British, I'm just saying there's a whole culture in which this was really quite common. And so then we understand. Take that and then take just an ordinary family in Tibet 100 years ago. They would look at that and they would slap their forehead, but, how's that possible? Except, they would also send their boys up to monastery. Except, if their child turned out to be a tulku. But even then, because I've known a lot of tulkus and a lot of monks, Tibetan monks, who were shipped off to the monastery when they were young. You're the second son. You're not going to inherit this land. There's not enough land to divvy it up. Just like in the English system, all of it goes to the eldest son. Well, that was the same thing in Tibet. All goes to the eldest son. Otherwise, you'd have 10 square meters from after several generations, and everybody would starve. So it has to be given only to the oldest son. And yet, I've lived with Tibetans, so I'm not speaking airy-fairy or some kind of Shangri-La kind of thing. And in not all cases, but in many cases, the sense of warmth and kindness and affection from the mother is still held and cherished. But they also found surrogates in the monastery. Not all of us. I don't mean to paint this as all rosy. It's not. But I've seen in many cases it really did work, and the monks coming out very healthy, loving, warm, grounded, very, very affectionate. I've seen that in many cases. That's my experience. And I know that other monks and other people have different experiences, and I respect that. So, but without lingering too long, most of us were not here in this room listening by podcast. We're not raised with our mother's milk, with a sense of reincarnation, of karma, of all sentient beings having been our mothers. So it's an article of faith, and it can easily get very abstract, even if we accept it. It's kind of like, okay, but it doesn't necessarily really stir the heart. And then many people are fortunate enough to have a very loving relationship with their mothers, and then many, not so much. So what about that? What about that other route? Not that it's better, but it may be better for some people, and that's why both are taught. And that is from the Manjushri Shantideva route. And there's no reference to that. That's not the starting point. To again, where's this connected to? How can we see the lovableness in the other person? How can we do that? Right? Well, you as your mother, if that works, but if it doesn't, then you shouldn't be out of luck just because you don't have a very deep conviction in reincarnation and you haven't had a really wonderful relationship with your mother. You can't choose those kind of things. So Shantideva starts out with arousing the sense of the equality of self and other. The equality of self and other, then the exchange for self and other, and then proceeding on from there, into Donglen and so on. So now this comes, and now we come back to Panchen Rinpoche's wisdom track, Vipashyana track. Examine closely your nezu, how you abide. How you abide. What is constant? From your worst behavior, moments, occasions of worst behavior, and your most sublime behavior, the most toxic your mind ever gets, and the most sublime your mind ever gets. Those are all namsu. Those are all ways you appear. Right? Appear to yourself mentally, appear verbally, appear physically, and so forth. They come and go. They're like weather patterns, right? Come and go, come and go. What abides through the course of your life, through all your moods, all your behavior, from the most sublime to the most disgusting? What abides? And I think His Holiness Dalai Lama has pointed to it. When he was asked in one of the meetings for which I served as interpreter, and I mentioned before, what's our deepest impulse, which is always there? Caring. Caring. In your worst moods, you're saying whatever you're saying because you care. In your most sublime moods and activities and so forth, you're doing what you're doing because you care. Right? And we can't stop that. That's hardwired. That's ingrained. You can change your mind any way you like, become an arhat, become a Buddha, become, an awful person. But you can't change that one. You can't uproot it, and you can't abolish it. You can't execute it, because your consciousness will simply carry on into the bardo, and it will still be carrying in the bardo. So there we are. That goes deep. We've gone right down to our root here, deep roots. And Buddhas care, and sentient beings care. So we see here common ground. Buddhas are conscious. We're conscious. We care. Buddhas care. Okay, common ground. No difference there. Sometimes the way we express our caring is very harmful. And that goes for everybody. when you think of the biggest villains of history, of individuals and communities, who've done the most just inconceivably awful things. They're doing it because they can. Right? Yeah. Extinctions of whole peoples and so forth. They're doing it. Extinction, the treatment of animals and so forth. They're doing it because they can. But of course the caring goes this far and then doesn't. And all the awful behavior goes for the other side of the fence. Right? This itself, just the words here are meditating. I'm meditating. I'm just following this. What is right there in the Buddha nature, right down to the core, right down to the ultimate ground, is caring. The Buddha rose, the Buddha achieved enlightenment out of caring. The Buddha stood up from his seat in Bodh-Gaya and set out on his long walk, the long march, because of caring. Europeans went to Africa in the 18th, 19th century, enslaving, killing, torturing, bringing them back to work, because they cared about their family. Right? Not about the blacks, they didn't care about them at all. They were just stuff to use. But they thought, oh, my family will, if we have more slaves, my family will prosper, take care of my children, will develop civilization on this wild frontier. So they did that out of caring too. But the barrier is so sharp. So sharp. But when a person expresses caring without it being disfigured on the way out, it's coming from Buddha nature. It's coming from there, and then manifests in words, facial expression, behavior, and so forth. If from that root, the sublimely, primordially pure root of Buddha nature, if it's not disfigured, damaged, warped, toxified on the way out, and we see somebody displaying caring in a way that is really relatively untainted, undamaged, then we say, look, that person is so caring. It's such a sweet phrase in English. I hope it translates well. But you say, oh, this person is so caring. That's a really nice thing to say about somebody. This person is so caring. And as soon as you say that, think of anybody, you know people. When you think of such a person, you think this person truly caring, genuinely, really caring. When you think that and that person comes to mind, loving kindness comes, doesn't it? Because it's a lovable quality. This person, this mother is so caring for children. This teacher is exceptional, so caring for her students. This politician really entered into public service. To be of service, really took it seriously. This is public service. To try to take care of the community, try to serve the voters, serve the population, serve the country. This politician is really caring. I love it when that happens. It does. It does. You know, they get shrouded up by all the noise of journalism. But they're there too. When we see that, it's endearing. And then we see other behavior that is still driven by caring, but it becomes toxified, and then we find it horrendously evil. But it's coming from the same. So I need to wrap up. But I think we're in deep waters here, where everything comes together. You can develop loving kindness in Shamatha. You can achieve Shamatha by way of loving kindness. Yeah? Very clearly taught. Buddha Gosa. Straightforward. The answer is yes. All the way to access to the first jhana. Loving kindness. The object of loving kindness is not sentient beings. The object of loving kindness is not loving. The object of loving kindness is not loving kindness. That is, when you're cultivating shamatha by way of loving kindness, your object is not, that is, how do you say, what you're developing shamatha in is not on sentient beings, and it's not on loving kindness. You're attending to sentient beings, but the shamatha, the relaxation, stability, and vividness is in your subjective mode of viewing. That is loving shamatha. It's shamatha loving. It's in the subjective mode. So to one of you I gave the example, a mother gazing at her 1-year-old baby lying peacefully in the crib, sleeping. And the mother gazes at the child, her beloved child, maybe her firstborn. And she just comes in at the soft lighting, just to check in on the child. And she just sees the child is sleeping peacefully. And she simply gazes. And with no effort, just the flow of caring, of love, affection, of warmth flows unimpeded, effortlessly. And she may linger there. And she doesn't, it would be so silly to clutter that with thinking, may you be well and happy, may you find the causes of happiness, may you find eudaimonic well-being too. You know, it's kind of like all of that talk and all the visualization and setting the child rays of light and so forth, all of the techniques are really to bring forth what she has already got. She is already resting in loving kindness. All the other techniques, all the other methods, thinking, imagining, visualizing, so forth, is all just to bring forth that which she has naturally for her child. And so she's resting, as she lingers there for a minute, 5 minutes, and so forth. She's resting in Shamatha of loving kindness, which is directed towards her child. But then if she's very deep, maybe she's really a deeply Dharma practitioner as well, then she takes her eyes off the child. Let's just pop it up in the 10-year-old child. But the same thing, the same affection is there. And then she looks over and into another bed in the child's room, and it's your child's best friend who's there for a sleepover, right? And no blood connection at all. But and then she sees this child, and it's so similar to her own child. And she looks upon this child, and it's just seamless, and the water just keeps on flowing. And here's a child who's equally precious. And without having to think or reason or visualize, just gazes upon this child, sleeping quietly, peacefully in bed. And the loving kindness is there. And then maybe she goes out to the window and just looks at the street below and people walking up and down on the street and cars going by. And it's flowing there. Right? Same. And then she just sits quietly, with nobody in particular come to mind. And she can still maintain it. Right? It's still dwelling in loving kindness. And whoever should come to mind is already a recipient. Whoever it is, if she's really broken down barriers, if she's really deeply realized in the Brahma Vihara of loving kindness, it was for her child, it was for the child's best friend, it was for strangers passing on the street. And then if she's really broken down the barriers, then someone who's treated her harshly comes to mind. And she sees right through the mode of appearance to the mode of existence. And this person too is worthy of loving kindness. So it's a matter of depth. The outer display is Robert De Niro, and weave it all together. Robert De Niro is playing a silly, goofy grandpa, and here he's playing another role. Different role from one film to the next. And yet that which abides. Sentient beings are manifesting in this role. We ourselves manifest in this role. And the common ground is we're all carrying. And that's deep, that's rooted in the ultimate ground. And when we see it come up, and it's untarnished, undisfigured from that, it's just endearing, right? And then when we see it get tarnished, and it's slave traders, capturing villages and so forth, if we can see through, we can still have that sense of caring for the slaves as well as the slave traders. Because they're all equal. And in this particular film, these are the victims and these are the victimizers. They're all seeking the same thing. And the ground is equally pure. When we attend to the ground, the way of existence, the deep way of existence, what is common as a slave trader comes home and embraces his children and gives his wife a gift and then beats his slaves. What's common? Caring. So the caring is deeper than the outer displays, which are like weather, they come and go. So loving kindness is rooted deeply in reality. And the appearances arising, like weather, they come and go. So where this really comes back to where it's complete nurture of the Vipashyana and the loving kindness is, can we direct our awareness inwards and see someone who is worthy of loving kindness, someone who's lovable? And the answer is yeah, so sure. Penetrate through the myriad modes of appearances to the way you abide, and the way you deeply abide, and the way you abide from your ground. And this is just pure caring. Pure caring. And you are a deeply caring person. Everyone is. And therefore lovable. So maybe something like that. Robert De Niro, Buddha Gosa, Panchen, Shamatha, Vipashyana, loving kindness, bodhicitta. All the same story. Please find a comfortable position. Making explicit your deepest motivation of caring, manifesting fully in full blossom as bodhicitta, caring for all the world. Settle your body, speech, and mind in the natural state. Come to that still point of awareness, simply resting in its own nature. Resting right where your substrate consciousness is. And resting right where your own pristine awareness is already present, always abiding. As the wellspring of all your aspirations and the fulfillment of all your aspirations. And note that this flow of awareness in which you rest is not simply cognitive, it's not simply a flow of luminosity and cognizance. It is indivisibly a flow of caring. It's innate. It indwells in that very flow of awareness. It always has, always will. We start briefly with the Shamatha, resting awareness in its own nature, illuminating and knowing itself. And you let the light of your awareness flow out to illuminate yourself as an individual, as a person, with a personal history, with a personality, and modes of behavior and attitudes. And you attend to these myriad manifestations of yourself. In many cases, simply going about your life, neither particularly virtuous nor non-virtuous. Caring, wanting to get by, to succeed, to get through the day. But on other occasions, this impulse of caring is obscured, veiled and distorted by delusion, by craving and attachment, by hostility, hatred. It's still the same stream, the same stream of consciousness. But now it flows out and meets the world as toxic, harmful to ourselves and others. As out of delusion, as we seek our own happiness, we destroy the causes of our happiness as if they were our foes. While we seek to be free of suffering, always moved by this impulse of caring, out of delusion. We hasten after suffering. We cultivate and perpetuate the causes of suffering. But through all the obscurations, the ground is pure, saturated by caring, manifesting as loving kindness. The one who abides by nature pure. By nature simply caring, deeply caring. And deeply worthy, utterly, absolutely worthy of finding happiness. And worthy of finding freedom from suffering. Worthy of being free of all afflictions and obscurations of the mind. Attend to yourself as the one who abides over time, not static, not unchanging. A flow of caring, a flow of awareness, a flow of clarity, a flow of purity. Adventitiously, now and then, obscured and then not obscured, but always brightly shining. Attend to the one who is brightly shining. By nature pure. Attend closely. You remember the meaning of the word. To attend, to look after, to care for, to tend to, and watch over. Tend to yourself in a spirit of loving kindness. And sustain that flow of awareness. And if you find it helpful, you may imagine the very source of this caring, your own Buddha nature, once again is an orb of light at your heart, with every out-breath. Breathe out this loving kindness. Let the light flow from your heart, permeate your entire being, body and mind. With the aspiration, may you be well and happy. May you be hedonically well, with all your needs met, and genuinely happy. With every out-breath, fill your whole being with this light of loving kindness. And imagine here and now, venturing into that realm of possibility. Being truly well and happy. Embodying such well-being. Emanating such well-being. Overflowing with such well-being. And like a tsunami of loving kindness, a wave of loving kindness flowing out in all directions, breath by breath. Imagine the sphere of light, the sphere of loving kindness extending into the space around you. To those in front, behind you, to the left and right. Expand the sphere also above and below. Whatever invisible beings may be there, embrace them in this field with every out-breath. Extend this flow of caring, this flow of loving kindness, this field of light. Breath by breath, may each of us be truly well and happy. And imagine it to be so. For those here in this room, expand this field, the sphere of loving kindness to embrace, to include everyone within the room, each one equally. Each one, when viewed from the deepest perspective, is you, in your myriad forms. And as you participate in this meditation, wherever you may be, and whenever, expand this field, the sphere of loving kindness, out beyond the confines of your room, your building, your immediate proximity. Out in all directions, embracing everyone who comes within the field, be they human, animal, or any other kind of sentient being. May each one be well and happy. Imagine it to be so. There's an underlying theme here in the union of wisdom and method, and that is, however dark our attitudes, our minds, speech, our bodies, behavior may be, light of pristine awareness is greater. It's infinitely greater. It overwhelms and banishes the darkness. And we know the darkness is great. We know the capacity for evil is enormous. But this is greater. It consumes all, transmutes all, heals all. liberates all. From this inexhaustible source, let this field, the sphere of loving kindness, envelop the whole earth. In a field of light, may all beings upon this earth, above and below, may each one be well and happy. And let the light be limitless, extending out into the deepest regions of space, permeating all the myriad worlds, wherever there are sentient beings, may each one, like ourselves, be well and happy. And for just a short time, release all imaginings, release all aspirations, all objects of the mind. Simply allow your awareness to rest in its own nature, clear and pure.
So